Welcome. You're listening to How I Did That, a storytelling podcast. Let's jump into today's episode.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Very excited to have you on today. Yes, you can get started.
Okay, so hi, I'm Shaelynn. I just graduated from University of Windsor in civil engineering. I'm from Calgary, and I've known Neha for 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years. I just thought it would be a good way to expose people to different career fields. And so that's why you're on here today. And
thank you. I really appreciate that because I feel even when you're in high school and you're applying into engineering, you think you know what you're getting into, but until you actually get there, it's a whole different story. We probably only started talking to people in like the higher years once we were in our second or third.
Mm-hmm.
So in first year, what do you know? What are you getting yourself into, right? So I think it's good to have this kind of outlet.
Did you know what you wanted to do in high school?
Okay, so I had two plans. My initial plan was law, but when I was looking into universities, most universities you need an undergrad before you get into law school. I didn't know if I would be able to continue that long with it, so I looked at my other options. Same as you, my dad's also an engineer, so I was kind of persuaded that way. And another thing is, I really liked AutoCAD. So in high school, we had some, I don't know the exact name, something design, where we actually designed some houses on AutoCAD, and I instantly fell in love. You know, my parents, they always say when I was younger, I used to write out contracts, I used to write out floor plans, just 3-year-old me just drawing out floor plans and giving it to my parents, and they're like, okay, that's great, you know? So it's interesting, but I guess subconsciously I always knew civil engineering. I think when I was in my second year of university, that's when I knew for sure civil's the right direction for me.
So you kind of went into it because you really liked design.
Mm-hmm. Play with toys and stuff, but I would watch movies and I would just fall in love with the rooms and the houses. I don't know if anyone else would pay attention to that.
I never paid attention to any of that.
There's some movies I watch just because of the set, just because of the house plans. So
it's so weird to see how different minds work, because I absolutely never paid attention to the set of a movie. I'm just watching the movie.
Oh my gosh, really?
Haha, Voldemort's nose, that's what I'm paying attention to. Like you were saying, you did this at a young age, and then you really liked AutoCAD, because for me, I started CATIA. We did CATIA right in first semester. Never wanted to look at it again, did not want to have anything to do with it. So probably was the opposite for you.
For me, it was kind of that first semester. I feel like engineering and design, at least, it could have been taught differently. I don't know if the content was correct for what we were trying to learn, because we went from drawing circles for 3 weeks and then bam, group project out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of okay, what does this have to do with anything? They didn't relate. I don't know if you felt the same way, but to me, those two concepts didn't really relate.
I felt like they could have stretched out design a little more and taught us a little more. It was just very quick. But I will get into the first semester of classes in a bit. I'll just go back to what we were saying about you really were into design, but why didn't you choose mechanical engineering? Because that's a lot of what AutoCAD is as well, right?
For me, I just felt with civil, there's different avenues of civil. If not just design, there's also transportation. There's also the structural part. You know, there's the steel and concrete. Those were things that I was interested in. I think there's just more opportunities outside of Alberta for me if I do civil. So that's why I want to keep my options open. It's a very petroleum and mechanical kind of place here, right? So I just wanted to do something where my career isn't heavily dependent on
where you
the
live.
Oil. Yeah. You know, our future, we know that's not a sustainable option, right? With all these future generations coming, you don't know where they're gonna go with oil, right? So I didn't want to do my whole career based on that and then have to like switch out of nowhere. And for me too, I feel like maybe like the impression I had of mechanical engineering was very like automotive and aerospace and stuff, and that wasn't something that I had interest in. Mine was strictly architectural design, not the design of parts and stuff.
I know there's specific architectural engineering degrees. Like, did you ever look into that?
No, I didn't actually. I kept my mind on just civil. Mm-hmm. With Windsor, applying into civil, you get into civil, right? Whereas schools like University of Calgary, it's based off your first year GPA. I have some friends who wanted to do civil and they got stuck in like different ones, like industrial and things, because it's so competitive with all the people. So it was kind of like the highest GPAs, they got to pick first. I didn't want to put myself in that position. And because I knew I wanted civil, I wanted to stick with that. So that's like half the reason I came to Windsor. It was that, and because of the co-op opportunity. Again, it's the same thing with other universities on like at least the West. I'm not sure about Ontario and stuff, but a lot of the schools, it's based off your GPA. Our class was a lot smaller than the classes at like University of Calgary. That's like 1,000 kids, maybe, give or take a bit. That's such a competitive environment to be in. Mm-hmm. Not that ours wasn't, but I didn't think I would be able to get into civil and get the co-op with that environment.
Okay, but do other schools in Canada, do they not have co-op programs? Because a lot of the US schools don't.
They do, but to my understanding, you have to apply for it within
like your GPA based and though.
So it's like in your first year you apply, and then based on your GPA, based on like the competitiveness, then you get it or not.
So how does it work in Windsor? I thought it is competitive here too, where like only certain people get picked. I don't know.
I think that is the situation, but you do have to maintain a 70 average, I believe. I think it's just like to be given that opportunity in itself. That's what Windsor has that other schools don't. So they won't even give you the job postings and stuff. A lot of people that I talk to outside of our university, they always told me co-op is not necessary. You can survive, you can find a great job after it. It just depends on connections and your own persistence, I guess, and like the effort you put into applying for those jobs.
I only had one internship for 3 months in my whole undergraduate career, and I ended up getting a job. Like, I didn't do a co-op, I did one internship. That was it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I feel like there's a lot of common misconceptions, and that's something I wish I knew too, is that co-op really isn't at all that it's made out to be. And I wish people didn't put that much pressure on themselves that they have to get co-op, because at the end of the day, I personally think it's better to graduate instead of being so burned out from working those 16 months and then coming back to school and just being so drained, like you don't have the energy. Like, I'd rather just get it all done in one stretch, and then we're gonna have to work for the rest of our lives, right?
Let's jump into so you decided you're gonna do civil engineering. You picked Windsor, you got in. How was your experience like coming to Windsor? Like, had you ever lived outside of Calgary before?
So for me, I was extremely homesick. I never lived away from home. I'm the baby of the family, so it was rough. My dad came to drop me off, and he had to extend his stay for a week, actually, because he just felt so terrible leaving me there. So, you know, like, I tried my best to settle, and I did end up settling pretty good, but I think that initial month was very rough for me. And, you know, just getting used to, because Windsor for me is a very small city, and coming from Calgary, it was a very big shift. So between being on your own, like, I didn't know anyone when I moved to Windsor, it wasn't like I had any friends from high school, which I felt a lot of kids knew each other from high school already. You know, they knew each other somehow. I felt like such an odd person out when I first came here. That was very interesting. And, you know, that, and then adjusting to engineering, that was kind of difficult in the sense you miss one day, you're behind. I wish I got my routine more in check before that second semester started, but if I had any advice for new coming first years, I would say try to stick to a schedule, try to keep in mind everything, don't leave everything last minute, because that's something I was extremely guilty of.
Basically, don't stick to the high school study schedule, because it's not high school.
Oh my gosh, 100%. I used to think high school was so complex, and then once I got to university, I'm like, wow, that's something completely different. Looking back, now we look at first year and second year, and we're like, that was so easy. What were we complaining about?
I know, it's like as soon as you progress, you look back and you're like, that wasn't as hard as I thought.
And I really think it's just because you don't know what you're signing up for until you get there. Once you get there, you're just so shock-ridden that, like, just trying to understand everything at once, like, it's very overwhelming, I would say. And even for me, so in Alberta, when we do calculus, we have calculus and we also have integral. We learn that stuff, and to my understanding, you guys do a little bit of linear algebra in high school?
I don't even think I touched on linear algebra. I don't remember doing anything related to matrices in high school. Maybe we did. Then integrals, we didn't touch anything. A lot of the people coming into university, I felt like they had done integrals.
Yeah, so that was like for me, right? I knew integrals, but I didn't know linear algebra. So going into linear algebra, that was like a whole different language for me. And it was so difficult to wrap my mind around it. As engineering students, it's kind of like coming from different provinces. You also have to learn with the provincial kids too, what they already know. When I was in high school in Alberta, our home exams were 50%. Most kids, from my understanding, the final exams were 30% in Ontario, right? Ours was 50%. So it was a big deal. It was a lot of pressure in high school to begin with. I remember going into university and people saying, oh, it's 50. I'm like, what's the big deal? Like, mine was 50 too.
I've never heard about that, where a high school exam is worth 50. That is a lot of pressure at that age.
So it was a lot of pressure, but it sucks because I was the last year they did the 50%. And then they switched it to 30. I'm like, you know what? It's fine. It builds character.
And the other thing is, like, so I was talking to somebody, and they had told me that during undergrad, like engineering, you kind of learn how to learn. It's not like specifically that you're learning like the calculus or you're learning the mechanics or whatever. You learn how to learn. So what I found was there were people who were like a couple of years older than us. Like they were not fresh out of high school and they were doing engineering first year. Those people, like I remember sitting next to one person in my tutorials. He was zooming through it. And I was like, am I missing something here? But I think it was just the fact that because he was older and more mature and maybe he had a degree before that, a lot of the people that I was with in my classes already had a degree or had some school experience and then decided to switch to engineering. And that maturity level and like learning how to learn in university kind of carries through. So when you start engineering later, you already kind of have that momentum of learning. You know how to learn and how to take material in. And so for them, it was easier. So I think for us coming fresh out of high school, we didn't know how to learn. And I think that's why it was the hardest. Because if I had to go back now and redo engineering, not the fact that like I've taken the courses, even if I had to do any other degree, I feel like I would do so much better.
No, I agree for sure. I feel like only within my third and fourth year, I figured out what teaching styles or studying styles were correct for me. So, you know, like some kids work best in groups. I realized I absolutely cannot talk to anyone when I study because I feel distracted. So I have to like put my hand like this so I can't see anyone, and I'm studying and I have my music in, and I'm just in my own zone. But not everyone studies that way, right? So I agree, like, you have to figure out, and that's another thing I think that's important in engineering, is it's good to have, like, friends in engineering, but you can't just go off their studying style. You can't just do what everyone else does. You have to go with what works for you.
What did you take in your first year? What was the course load like? And what did you take? How many classes did you take? And can you give a little bit of an overview about each course?
So I took 5 classes. I took engineering mechanics, engineering and design, differential calculus, linear algebra, and engineering and professions. The problem is, like, looking back, it all seems easy, but at the time, it felt very rough. Those classes, they are important. In first year, you don't think it's a big deal, but when you go throughout your years, you realize, oh, those were things I learned in first year. That's really important. So with engineering mechanics, we did statics, I believe. Do you remember what else?
It was statics, like forces, trusses, cut moments, all that kind of stuff.
Beams and stuff.
Free body diagrams, a lot of them.
Yeah. I believe that's a class for mechanical and civil kids. That's something that you take throughout your whole degree. So very important. Engineering and design we talked about earlier. We learned like basic freehand drawings and like the different sides. And then we had a group project. And then differential calculus, almost exact same as high school calculus. And then linear algebra, we also talked about the matrices and what is it?
Like
identity
eigenvalues, eigenvectors, identity matrix. But there was so much more to that. There was like the null space.
And then engineering and professions. We had some debates in that class, I believe. Every week we had 15, was it 1,500 or 23? It was some very...
I don't remember the length.
It was unnecessarily large, like 2,700 words, something like that.
Yeah.
I'm actually very grateful for it because I feel like it helped me in my writing skills. Yeah, I feel like it did help a lot in the long run, but I don't think it was necessary to make it 2,700 words or whatever the number was.
I was talking to someone from industry and they were telling me that a lot of engineering students, entry-level engineers, their communication, like technical communication, writing skills are not good. Yeah.
When I see people and they see my writing, they're like, where did you learn to write like that? And I'm like, professions. I stayed up till like 4 a.m. every day writing.
Moving forward to next semester, what did you guys take?
So next semester we took thermal fluids, integral calc, Intro to Physics 2, topics general chemistry, and technical communications. So engineering thermal fluids, it was separated into 3 parts. I know one was thermal fluids, one was heat transfer, and I'm drawing a blank what the third one was.
Was it like thermodynamics, fluids, or something?
I think it was. I think you're right. I feel like the heat transfer things, it was more based on the differential calculus. So I think you needed differential calculus to continue on. Integral calc, backwards of differential calc. And we learned a lot of different principles and theories in there. And then technical communications was, we had a big group project. And before that, we had a few guest speakers, just a few things on like professionalism.
Didn't you build the Lego NXT robot?
Yeah, so that was like that big group project at the very end.
I've heard from industry professionals that like entry-level engineers don't know how to properly write technical documents. Like I was saying earlier, right? Our writing is apparently not very good. And so I was talking to one professor actually, and he was saying that I don't know how we would change the curriculum so that we don't have a ton of writing classes, but at the same time we can improve the writing in our curriculum for like graduating engineers. I don't know what we would do because like they literally had 3 communication classes first year, and I think that was too much. I don't know what they would do.
That was too much to put in the first year. it's one thing if they spread it out. If it was spread out one each year, that would have been, I think, a lot more productive than having 3 of this almost same class at the same time.
Yeah, they actually didn't have any other technical communication kind of classes right after that. It's like 6 courses a semester, and almost none of them are technical communication.
That would have probably been a good way to solve that, because I feel like a lot of kids don't appreciate those classes in their first year. So that's kind of where a lot of people miss that mark with that communication standpoint. So when they go into the work field, they don't have that communication because those classes had like no impact on their life. A lot of our classes, which I'll get to after, but a lot of them, there was so many lab reports, but I feel like we could have maybe made that into different outlets of writing. You know what I mean? Because
yeah,
there was a point where we did the same lab 3 times, I believe.
I don't know what else they could do with PowerPoint and how to better be more effective at presentations and all. I don't know what they could do, but I think the curriculum does definitely need to be changed.
Yeah, I agree.
So now moving on to second year.
Second year, I believe there's some that it splits. So that's where it splits from the electrical engineers, and then the mechanical and civils stay together in some classes. In the first semester of second year, I had engineering software fundamentals, electrical and computing fundamentals, engineering and environment, dynamics, and differential equations. Yeah, you know, I think it was vector first and then DE.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of to give a last call for, if anyone's interested in this, go to electrical. Like, you're in the wrong place kind of thing, right? And I feel like they kind of gave us okay, here's like a little bit of knowledge on electrical engineering. So circuits and like node analysis. Yeah, just a whole bunch of things like that.
Okay.
And then we had engineering software fundamentals where we did MATLAB and a little bit of C++, and then engineering and environment. I feel like that was kind of an intro to sustainability and all the different factors of like environmental engineering in everyday engineering. Dynamics made me cry. That one, we had that project. I think it changes every semester. Our teacher told us, I think the rules change every year, so ours was you had a certain amount of materials and you had to make it move 5 feet straight and then 5 feet turning based on the weight moving. So you can't do anything. It's just when they let go and they put the weight, it needs to move on its own. The other courses and vector calculus, which is where we get into like triple integrals and things like that.
Parametric equations, vector fields.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of more probably the most abstract calculus, I would say.
I feel like vector calculus was the most useful moving forward.
Where did you use vector calculus, or where did you find that it was more helpful?
It's like the triple integrals and stuff. I saw that later on in a few classes. I don't remember. I feel like it was in stress analysis and like finite element analysis. We saw things like that.
Oh, okay, because I didn't take those, yeah.
So maybe for like civil, that might have been more useful.
Okay. So like second semesters where you specialize.
Yeah. So we had numerical analysis, mechanics of deformable bodies, treatment of experimental data. Then that's when I had civil engineering information systems and materials in civil and environmental engineering. Treatment of experimental data, that was also kind of, I don't want to say probability, but actually, yeah, because it was experimental data, right? So we did a lot of the calculation side of what to do with data were presented. I don't really remember DEFBODs. Kind of a continuation of dynamics.
Yeah, if you can remember like kind of which course was the prerequisite for it.
So mechanics mechanics, I believe, physics, I think, numerical analysis.
Was that the advanced MATLAB? Like numerical methods?
Yeah, because we did half of it on MATLAB, but then the other half was on paper. So we did a lot of like equations on paper. And then civil engineering information systems, my favorite class. So that one was where we do AutoCAD, we do GIS, so geographical information system. So that's like, have you heard of like, surveying, right? So it's kind of like how you do surveying and you apply it online and you make like maps and you make satellites, like the images and stuff.
Can you explain what surveying is for people who don't know?
Okay, so for people who don't know, surveying is when you do kind of the scaling for maps. I remember we had a few labs where we went in person and we would calculate the distance from like one point to another point and then what was like the elevation. So when we go online, we would put that on GIS and we would put that on AutoCAD and you would have like an accurate drawing of what the engineering plot would look like. I mean, like the engineering buildings.
Do they make contour plots as well? Like that's where it shows the height levels and all, right?
Yes. So I think that's what you do, different layers and stuff. In that course, we didn't get that far. And then materials in civil and environmental, that was where we were introduced to steel, concrete, wood, masonry, and like the kind of calculations, the kind of daily use, the labs, like where and when you can use those materials. That's also a very important class, I think. Third year, we had fluid mechanics, stress analysis, structural analysis, concrete design, geotechnical engineering, and then engineering and economy. Structural analysis is where we talk about like, what kind of things you have to take into account when you're making a structure, really. Like you have to take in what kind of dead weight's going to be there, what kind of live loads are going to be there. Stress analysis is when we talk about the stress and strain of different bodies, if they're in motion or if they're static. Concrete design, I felt was very similar to stress analysis, but more on a concrete material standpoint. And then fluid mechanics, we talk about when fluids are in motion and what kind of forces there are and the viscosity and
equations used to model them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like what equations you would use.
And Bernoulli's equation, which is a very commonly known.
Yeah. And geotechnical engineering, when you do soil samples and soil analysis. Again, that's very connected to like materials, but more so on like the soil masonry kind of standpoint. And engineering economy, that was a general engineering class.
So at my school, for that course, it was, I think, from the business department, where it was just economics. It wasn't really engineering related at all, but we did have to know how to do economic calculations. So was it kind of the same for you guys?
I think so.
So then moving to second semester of your third year.
Second semester of third year, masonry and concrete design, where we talked about like further in depth of just concrete and how you would manage concrete, what kind of concrete you can use. Oh, and also we have a huge Bible-sized book that you have to like refer to, and it's all the different kinds of steels and concretes. And then finite element for analysis and design. So our school does it a little differently. Our first half of that semester, we talk about the National Building Code of Canada. And we're basically taught, like, you have to know it word for word. And then, yeah, right? It's kind of, it was a little odd. But then the second half is finite element analysis. And then geotechnical engineering 2. Again, just a more in-depth version of the first geotechnical engineering. Structural steel, we had the again, another Bible-sized textbook where all the different steels are there, and you have to figure out if there's X amount of load, what kind of steel can you use? If it's this environment, what kind of steel can you use? If you're making a building of this size, what steels? So I feel like that semester was very important. And then, we also had transportation and traffic engineering. They introduced us to dilemma zones, like the calculations that go into a stop sign, calculations that go into how long a pedestrian walking time should be. They'd say like this way is 6 lanes and it's 2 directions. So how much walking time is needed? And then how long should a stop sign be? Because there's a thing called like dilemma zones. So, when there's like a yellow light and you're deciding if you should go or stay. So there's a space before you pass the crossing line where it's considered a dilemma zone. So it's kind of like, how long is your dilemma zone going to be in each place? So how long should the yellow light be? How long should the red light be? That was it for third year.
Cool.
So I feel like third year was extremely important. Any advice for anyone would be second semester of third year, work your hardest. From there onwards.
Did you think third year was the hardest?
I do think so, yeah. I feel like that semester, because when it was in the summer, your mind is somewhere else. You're just trying to stay focused, and then it was very heavy. The work was heavy. I think especially with finite element, I loved the class, but it was a heavy workload.
Going to your fourth year, can you give us a bit of overview? And I know there's probably a lot of electives in fourth year. Can you talk about what electives you took as well?
My electives, I actually took them at odd times. So one of them I took in third year fall, and another one I took in second year summer. So one I took was microeconomics, and the other one I took was a psychology course called Gal Pals, Women in Friendship.
There's a course on that?
And it's called Gal Pals. It's actually called Gal Pals.
It's so funny. I mean, I think we should also note that the way your classes are structured, you guys get random off semesters for people who do co-op. So your classes are not always fall, winter.
I think you start to see that in your third year. For civil engineering, at least, it's the fall you have classes, then winter you have off, then summer you have classes. And then in fourth year, it's the fall term you have off, winter you have classes, summer you have classes. It's a weird timing, but I think it's fine. Fourth year, I had my capstone. I had water distribution and wastewater collection systems, hydrology, hydraulics, water and wastewater treatment. It was interesting, like we talk about how much water is literally wasted. You talk about like how much water individuals use in a day. We had to do some labs on things you find in wastewater. That was a lot of pathogens. It was kind of, I remember we had one lab where they just kept emphasizing, do not touch your eyes. You touch your eyes, you go blind, kind of thing. And I was like, why are you letting us touch this? And we didn't even have masks. They only gave us like eye protection and gloves. Now thinking about it, like post-corona world, I'm like, we should have had masks on. University of Windsor, they actually do a lot of research about water treatment. I forget the guy's name, but he's like a great lab tech at the school. So he was in charge of all our labs, and he kept, he was the one who like showed us how many like diseases were in some of the samples of water. Yeah, it was horrifying. But the thing is, like, when they said wastewater, they told us it was like dirt and like things collected in it. But even then, like, just the thought of wastewater, like, so we also had water distribution and wastewater collection systems. So kind of self-explanatory, like the different routes we take water, all the ways you can collect water with the watersheds and stuff. Hydrology, kind of the same. Not gonna lie, a lot of those classes were very, very similar to each other. Hydraulics, water mechanics, basically. And then capstone, that's when we picked our groups. That's when we did our progress report. That's when we met with our industrial advisors and our professors.
So do you guys get a separate course where you get time to work on that capstone, or is it purely like extra out of class time?
Out of class time. But every week we had a capstone class where we had a guest speaker come and speak to us. In that one, we had to show up. We had to write a comment card, and that was our grade for punctuality and like professionalism and stuff. So for people who don't know, capstone is kind of like the wrap up of your degree, right? Where you're either given a project or you pick a project with a group or on your own. I've known some people who did it by themselves. You have an industrial advisor, you have an academic advisor, and you're basically presenting this project at the end of the year to all the faculty and all your peers. A lot of those projects go on to be actual projects later on.
Yeah, I know some people who have the idea and they kind of start it with the resources given for capstone and then continue that idea out of college. But I think the college has the rights to your project. They have the patent, right? So you can't patent it on your own.
Some kids, like someone had like an amazing thing. They had the resources from the school. If they used it as their capstone project, same thing, the school would get the credit for it. They did amazing, and they were going to use it as their...
Like a startup?
It is a startup company now, and they were going to use it as their capstone, and that's when they realized same thing.
So can you tell us a bit about the last semester of your fourth year and the courses you took and an overview?
Capstone design, the second half of it, highway design and construction, engineering and society, planning and construction management, and then we had to pick 2 courses. So I picked transportation systems analysis and sustainability and engineering. Highway design and construction was a little more in depth of the transportation and traffic engineering course. So this one we talked about the placement of signs, how many lanes should be in a highway, if people are going how fast, like people switch lanes, like just the analysis of that. Engineering and society was the ethics for moving forward and what we have to prepare when we're becoming professional engineers and the responsibilities and our ethics exam that we have to take after we graduate. So just kind of preparing us for that, I guess. And then planning and construction management is the more project manager based course. So civil engineers can work as project manager. Just talking about the different types of projects, more of the management when you're doing construction basically, and how to be like a project manager for that. Transportation systems analysis, it was a elective. It was a bit more in depth on how to basically traffic, but like the third version. And then sustainability and engineering. We talked about just the importance of sustainability now in like the engineering field and what we can't be negligent, I guess, of the environment. And everything in engineering now is based on sustainability. You see it now how seriously all companies are taking sustainability. Like almost every company, there's a sustainability report at the end of the year. My dad, he works at Suncor, right? Their oil sands and stuff. They're taking new initiatives to make it more sustainable and less harmful to the environment. You know, it's like people are holding these companies accountable now, and it's very important, I think. Once you learn more about sustainability, you just become so much more self-aware.
Yeah.
How harmful like us as individuals are to the world. Fast fashion, things like meat production. Like I know you're vegan, but even there is some points of that are harmful.
There's a whole thing about like almond milk, where the farmers in California, it's basically dehydrating the entire state because the almonds need so much water, even though that's vegan. So people are like, switch to cashew milk, switch to oat milk. Literally, there is an impact of almost everything we do.
we can't point fingers at one person or one people. It's everyone, all of us in some way. We're holding back sustainability, so it's like that course is so important because it talks about how many factors go into it and how much, like, as an engineer, you have to look at the big picture. They were talking about the new bridge that they're planning on building in Windsor, the different factors that went into it, like all the people that it would affect, all the houses, all the routes of driving, all these things. I think it's great that that was left for, like, the end of the year, end of the degree, because it really puts everything together and it really helps you to see how important your engineering degree is.
What would you say were the most important courses for a graduating civil engineer to have a good knowledge of to work in industry?
I think it really depends on which route of engineer or civil engineering you're most interested in. Like, there's a semester for everything almost. So I feel like that last semester was very focused on transportation based. The semester before that was very water based. The one before that was like structural. Like I was saying too earlier, I feel like third year, second semester onwards, those are the most important classes. The knowledge you learn from those classes are ones you'll take with you outside of your degree. The other ones are amazing foundations. Like, you need to have those courses to understand. Like, I know that's a given, but I hope if someone younger is listening to this, like, they take that seriously, that if you don't have a good foundation in your first and second year classes, third and fourth, they're going to make no sense.
That's a thing with many of the other engineering majors. If you don't have a good knowledge, like if you don't have solid background on years 1 and 2, you will really struggle in years 3, especially because year 3 is usually very heavy with the calculations, and then year 4 is like electives, capstone, but you still won't understand what you're doing if you don't have the background knowledge.
I feel like once you're in your third and fourth year, you should know those. Like, if you're given a triple integral or something, for example, you should know how to do that back of your mind. That should be so easy for you. Only, like, I'm saying that in the sense that, not like condoning anyone, like, oh, if you don't know it, like, shame on you kind of thing, but I'm saying, like, that's how seriously you should be taking those third year or second year, courses and first year courses. And like I was saying earlier, those engineering profession classes and technical communication classes, they don't seem relevant at the time, but once you move forward in capstone and stuff, you do those group projects in first year, so when you go into capstone, it's not a problem working in a group. My advice is also not to get discouraged based on your grades. First year, second year, you're not going to see the cutest grades. Like, you're not going to be that proud of them, but that's the whole problem with, like, not problem, like, how do I word that?
It's just the way it's structured. Like, you have to learn how to study and you have to learn how to fail and get back up.
Yeah, and that's, sorry, that makes sense, thank you. So it's kind of like, it shows you the real world. You're not going to win everything you get in life. After high school, life isn't exactly how you want it to go. Everything goes a different way than you plan it to be. And it's just, how do you take that? How do you manage those struggles? And how do you manage those grades? How do you overcome that, right? Because it's either you quit or you find a way to, okay, I need to change this instead of feeling sorry for myself.
And I think Dr. Ori had told us that in professions in the very beginning. And I think I remember he said something about, you need to get used to failing. It's going to happen to everybody. And I did not believe him. It happened. So you get used to it. Like, the first time you fail something, it's so defeating, right? The second time, the third time, the fourth time, you're like, you get used to it. And I'm not saying, like, you need to study for the courses, right?
When we get into engineering, that feels like the mountain. Like, we've already climbed our mountain. So once we get there, we think, oh, we accomplished something so great. But the reality is, there's 500 other people there exactly like us. we might think we're like the most special person in the world for getting into engineering, but I think a lot of people get carried away with that mindset in first year, and then they don't put as much effort as they could. I feel like that's something everyone could work on maybe in first year.
So I wanted to talk to you about, can you talk a bit about what internships or jobs did you do over the course of 4 years that you think will be relevant to helping you work in industry?
So I worked 2 engineering companies. So one was a company called Blue Star Engineering. So that's in Calgary. There I worked on just checking over drawings. Like, that showed me the importance of, you can't just mindlessly do your work, like, because we have to we have to check those drawings like 3-4 times over, because one little mistake, like one wrong steel, that's it, like the whole thing can come apart. That was when I was in my first year or second year, I think second year summer, so I still wasn't as experienced in engineering, so kind of going in there I was a little intimidated. I don't think people took me as seriously, like just a little girl kind of there. And then the following summer I worked at a company called BRT Consulting. So we were a consulting firm. I loved my job there. I worked on demolition reports. We did the sign inspections for City of Edmonton. So we checked the steel on each sign on each road. So just planning that, writing all the reports for that, like, I really enjoyed it there. So yeah, now I'm looking for a job. Kind of hard during a pandemic, but
I think I mentioned this earlier, but I only had 1 internship as well, and then you had like 2 internships. But getting into my first internship, I found it so intimidating because I had no idea what industry was going to be like. Nobody prepared me for what it was like to work in industry, what they expect. And every workplace is so different. Like my first job, every single person was in at 7 a.m. and then left at 3:30 p.m., like on the dot. And then my second job, people came in at 8, some people came in at 9. People are so much more chill with the time, and then they leave a bit later, they come in earlier. The work culture is so different in every job that you can't really compare it. It just kind of, every place has their own workflow. How did you find it working in industry for the first time?
just like you said, very intimidating. I felt like it was kind of, I was just put in this place where everyone just knew what to do. And I was just kind of there like, do I look silly if I ask for help? Do I look silly if I if I finish something quickly and I gave it to them, then I'm like, oh, does this look bad? Does it look like I didn't put enough effort? But
That's
I
what
did.
I thought too.
I felt very out of place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was because I just wasn't mature enough to work, because I don't believe I was mature enough. Going in now, it would be a lot different. But yeah, I think initially it's just that fear of what other people think was kind of hovering over my head the whole experience. I don't know why. Looking back, that shouldn't have been. It was, I just kept thinking, oh, they probably think I'm not doing enough work. But at the same time, they didn't have that much work for me, right? So
No, it's like intern work, like co-op work. They don't really give you work that they're working on. They'll give you some other side project. That's what happened with me. I feel like people wouldn't take an intern as seriously because they're not really contributing to the actual project. They're just doing like intern work.
That's kind of how I felt. I'm glad I got that experience. So now going forward, I know how assertive I have to be. In some environments, I do end up being shy, but going forward, you can't be that way. Just to clarify, I am so grateful for both experiences I had. It's just the work culture is different everywhere. The second place I worked at, it was about 15 people. It's a lot smaller, a lot more casual. But then my first job was very, get there at this time, do your work, go home at this time. Whereas the other one's like, stroll in when you feel like it, go and talk to whoever when you feel like it, take a break, so it was very different. Trying to see what kind of work environment you enjoy and like which ones will you be able to handle. I think that's important too.
What types of jobs or fields can people go into with a civil engineering degree, just a bachelor's?
You can go into consulting, so companies like the BRT that I was at, where we provide like structural consultation, structural things for different clients. Then there's construction, that's a big one. There's geotechnical, so where you do like site analysis. There's steel and concrete. There's transportation, structural for homes, bridge projects, lots of bridges, right? Municipality kind of jobs too, where they do like approvals for certain projects.
Because you guys did take a whole semester on like water courses, right? So what kind of things can you do with water?
Yeah, so there
Making
are
buildings?
lots. So, for example, with my capstone project, we worked on creating a force main for wastewater. So that's civil engineering, because you're figuring out how to deal with water and make a pipe that goes under the river. With wastewater and water, you have to figure out like where can you build stuff around water, how to treat water, what amount of it you can treat.
Can you talk a bit more on your capstone project? Because I forgot to ask you exactly what you did for that.
I worked with a group of 4, including myself, and we worked with Amical Engineering. And what we did was, like I said earlier, so there's an island in between Detroit and Windsor called Boblo Island. For those of you who don't know, it used to be an amusement park. It closed in 93, I believe, because of like poor management. More people went to Ohio. J. Cole actually shot a song there called Boblo Boat. This company, they're changing that island to like a residential property. So it's supposed to have like a resort kind of thing to it. But the problem with that is because the island was designed for an amusement park, the wastewater plant is not designed for residential properties. And it's also reached the end of its course. That's when we created a force main that's going to transport the wastewater to Windsor. And it'll go to Amherstburg's wastewater treatment plant. So the water will get cured there. This took 8 months.
All right. Was there anything else you wanted to say that I missed?
No.
And like, let's say any tips for incoming freshmen.
I would say don't lose focus. That's a huge thing. I think there's a lot of kids who, it's their first time being away from home, so getting that freedom. But with freedom comes a lot of responsibility. You could either find a good balance, or you go too far and you lose sight of engineering. It's going to be like something you regret later. And I think the other important thing I said earlier was you don't have to do everything everyone else does. So just because everyone else's learning style might be one way doesn't mean you have to learn that way. So you have to find what really works for you, because at the end of the day, you're the one writing the exams. You're the one who has to practice that. So I think it's important to know.
Personally, like I have seen people lose sight of the end goal where they just kind of switch majors because they don't think that they can make it in engineering. And they still want to be engineers, but they don't think they can do it. But I think everybody can do it, but you just have to surround yourself with people who are working towards that goal, like your classmates, and make connections and take use of your resources. But good talk. One day some like 9th grader is gonna contact you and be like, you inspired me.
I hope so.
But thank you so much for joining today. I'm sorry it went. All
care.
right, sounds good. Okay, bye.
Goodbye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning into today's episode, and we'll see you next time.